Bear cub was pinned beneath a giant fallen eagle nest. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning started like any other at the small cabin tucked deep in Pine Ridge Forest. 18-month-old Maya sat on the wooden porch, her chubby fingers wrapped around a bright red toy truck. She pushed it back and forth across the weathered planks, making soft vrooming sounds that mixed with the gentle rustle of leaves overhead. Maya's mother, Iris, was inside preparing breakfast. The smell of pancakes drifted through the open door, sweet and warm. Maya's father, Quinn, had left early that morning to check the old water pump near the creek. It was just another peaceful Tuesday in their quiet corner of the wilderness. Maya looked up from her toy when she heard a strange sound. It wasn't the usual chirping of birds or the distant hum of insects. This was different, sharper. She tilted her head, her dark eyes scanning the tree line beyond their small yard. The sound came again, a high-pitched cry that seemed to come from somewhere deep in the forest. Maya dropped her truck and crawled to the edge of the porch. Her tiny hands gripped the wooden railing as she pulled herself up to standing. Iris appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "What are you looking at, Sweet Pea?" she asked, following Maya's gaze toward the trees. The cry echoed through the forest again, more urgent this time. Iris frowned. She had lived in these woods for 3 years now, ever since she and Quinn decided to leave the city behind. She knew the sounds of the forest well. This wasn't normal. "It's not a bird," Iris murmured, stepping closer to Maya. She scooped up her daughter and held her close. "What do you think that is, baby girl?" Maya pointed toward the trees with one pudgy finger. "Mama," she said in her sweet, high voice. It was one of the few words she knew clearly. The sound came a third time, and now Iris was certain. Something was in distress out there, something small and scared. She looked down at Maya, who was still pointing toward the forest with determination. "Should we go see?" Iris asked softly. She knew Quinn would want her to wait for him to return, but something about the desperate quality of those cries tugged at her heart. Maya clapped her hands together and bounced in her mother's arms. "Yes, yes," she babbled, though the words weren't quite clear. Iris made a decision. She grabbed the baby carrier from inside the cabin and strapped Maya securely to her chest. She pulled on her hiking boots and grabbed a water bottle from the kitchen counter. Whatever was making those sounds needed help, and they were the only ones around to provide it. The forest was thick around their cabin, with towering pines that blocked out much of the morning sun. Iris followed a narrow deer path that wound deeper into the woods, toward where the cries seemed to be coming from. Maya sat quietly in her carrier, her eyes wide as she took in the sights and sounds around them. As they walked, the cries became clearer. They were definitely coming from an animal, something young by the sound of it. Iris felt her heart rate pick up. Young animals usually meant protective parents nearby. She slowed her pace and listened carefully for any signs of larger creatures in the area. The path curved around a massive boulder, and suddenly the source of the distress became visible. About 50 feet ahead, in a small clearing, something large and dark was moving on the ground. Iris stopped walking and squinted through the dappled sunlight. It took her a moment to understand what she was seeing. An enormous pile of branches and twigs lay scattered across the forest floor. It looked like it had fallen from somewhere high above. And trapped beneath part of that pile was a small, furry shape that was struggling weakly. "Oh no," Iris whispered. She could see now that it was a bear cub, probably only a few months old. Its dark fur was matted with dirt and bits of debris. One of its back legs appeared to be pinned under a particularly large branch. Maya had gone very still in her carrier. She was staring at the trapped cub with an intensity that surprised her mother. Her small hands were pressed against the front of the carrier, as if she was trying to reach out toward the animal. Iris's mind raced. Where was the mother bear? Cubs this young didn't travel far from their mothers. She scanned the surrounding trees, looking for any sign of movement. The forest was eerily quiet except for the cub's weak cries. She took a step closer, then stopped. Getting near a trapped bear cub was dangerous enough, but if the mother appeared, it could be deadly. Bears were fiercely protective of their young, but the cub's cries were getting weaker, and Iris could see that it was exhausting itself trying to get free. Maya made a soft sound, almost like a whimper. When Iris looked down, she saw that her daughter's eyes were filled with tears. Somehow, even at 18 months old, Maya understood that the little animal was suffering. "I know, baby," Iris whispered. "I know it's sad." The cub stopped struggling for a moment and lifted its head. Its small dark eyes met Iris's across the clearing. In that moment, she saw something that made her decision for her. Despite its fear and pain, there was still trust in those eyes. This baby animal was looking to her for help. Iris moved forward slowly, speaking in a soft, calm voice. "It's okay, little one. We're going to help you." She kept her movements slow and deliberate, watching the trees around them for any sign of the mother bear. As she got closer, she could see the full extent of what had happened. The pile of branches wasn't random debris. It was the remains of what had once been a massive eagle's nest, built high in the canopy above. The nest must have been ancient, growing larger each year as the eagles added to it. Something had caused it to finally break free from its perch and crash to the ground. The cub was trapped under one of the main support branches, a piece of wood nearly as thick as Iris's arm. Its back leg was pinned, but she could see that it was still moving. That was a good sign. The cub was hurt, but not critically injured. Maya began making soft cooing sounds from her carrier. To Iris's amazement, the cub's ears perked up at the sound. It stopped crying and looked directly at Maya with curiosity. "He likes you," Iris told her daughter softly. "I think he knows you want to help." The question was how. The branch was too heavy for Iris to lift alone, and she couldn't get a good angle on it while wearing the baby carrier. She looked around the clearing, searching for something she could use as leverage. That's when she noticed something strange. There were drag marks in the dirt near the fallen nest, as if something large had been pulled across the ground. But the marks didn't lead away from the nest. They led toward it. Iris felt a chill run down her spine. What if the cub hadn't just happened to be in the wrong place when the nest fell? What if something had dragged it here? But that didn't make sense. What animal would drag a bear cub toward a fallen eagle's nest? Maya made another soft sound, and again the cub responded by lifting its head toward them. Iris noticed something else odd. There were no signs of the cub's mother anywhere. No tracks, no broken branches, no scent markings. It was as if this baby bear had simply appeared in the clearing alone. The cub tried to move again, and its weak cry pierced the air. Time was running out. Whatever had brought this little animal to this place, it needed help now. Iris made her decision. She would figure out how to free the cub and worry about the mysterious circumstances later. She unstrapped Maya from the carrier and set her down on a soft patch of moss at the edge of the clearing. "Stay right here, baby girl," she said firmly. "Mama needs to help the little bear." But as soon as Iris turned toward the trapped cub, Maya began to crawl forward across the forest floor. Her determination was remarkable for such a small child. She moved steadily toward the pile of branches, making soft babbling sounds as she went. "Maya, no!" Iris called, but her daughter paid no attention. She continued crawling until she reached the edge of the fallen nest. Then, to Iris's shock, Maya stretched out one tiny hand and gently touched the cub's fur. The effect was immediate. The cub stopped struggling and went completely still. It looked up at Maya with what could only be described as wonder. For a moment, the two babies, one human, one bear, simply stared at each other. Then Maya did something that took Iris's breath away. She began to sing. It wasn't really a song, just the soft, wordless melody that Maya sometimes hummed when she was content. But the sound of it seemed to calm the cub completely. Its breathing slowed, and some of the panic left its eyes. Iris realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. Her 18-month-old daughter was communicating with a wild animal in a way she had never seen before. And somehow, impossibly, it was working. The cub made a soft sound in response to Maya's singing, almost like it was trying to sing along. Maya giggled and patted the cub's head gently. She seemed completely unafraid, as if she had been interacting with bear cubs her entire life. But Iris's wonder quickly turned to alarm when she heard something that made her blood run cold. From somewhere deep in the forest came the sound of heavy footsteps crashing through the underbrush. Something large was moving toward them, and it was moving fast. Iris's first instinct was to grab Maya and run. Every parenting book she had ever read warned about the dangers of getting between a mother bear and her cub. But as she moved toward her daughter, something stopped her in her tracks. The footsteps weren't coming from the direction she expected. If this was the cub's mother returning, she would be coming from deeper in the forest, where bears typically made their dens. But these sounds were coming from the direction of their cabin, from the path they had just walked. Maya continued to pat the cub's head, completely oblivious to the approaching danger. The little bear had closed its eyes and seemed to be drifting off to sleep under her gentle touch. Iris noticed that the cub's breathing had become deeper and more regular. Whatever Maya was doing, it was working better than any medicine. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied now by the sound of branches breaking and leaves rustling. Iris positioned herself between Maya and the sound, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She picked up a fallen branch, knowing it would be useless against a full-grown bear, but needing something in her hands. Then, through the trees, she saw movement. A flash of bright orange fabric. Iris nearly collapsed with relief. It wasn't a bear at all. It was Quinn, wearing his hiking jacket, pushing through the undergrowth toward them. "Iris!" he called out, his voice filled with worry. "I heard you calling from the cabin. Are you okay?" But Iris hadn't been calling. She had been speaking softly to the cub, but certainly not loud enough for Quinn to hear from their cabin, which was at least a quarter-mile away. A cold feeling settled in her stomach. Quinn burst into the clearing, breathing hard from his run through the forest. His eyes immediately went to Maya, who was still sitting next to the trapped cub, then to the pile of fallen branches, then back to Iris. "What happened here?" he asked, taking in the scene. "And why did you call my name? I was down by the creek when I heard you shouting for help." Iris stared at her husband. "I never called for you, Quinn. I never shouted at all." "Ah," Quinn's face went pale. "But I heard you, clear as day. You were screaming my name, saying something about Maya being in danger. I dropped everything and ran back to the cabin, but you weren't there. Then I heard voices coming from this direction." A chill ran down Iris's spine. She had been speaking quietly the entire time. There was no way Quinn could have heard her from the creek, even if she had been shouting, and she definitely hadn't called his name. "Quinn," she said slowly, "if you heard me calling for help, but I wasn't calling for help, then who was?" They both stood in silence for a moment, the implications of the question sinking in. The forest around them had gone completely quiet, as if every animal within miles had stopped what they were doing to listen. Maya, meanwhile, had discovered something interesting about the trapped cub. She had worked her tiny fingers under the edge of the branch that was pinning the animal's leg. The wood was old and partially rotted, and pieces of it were crumbling away under her touch. "Look at that," Quinn said softly, his concern about the mysterious voice temporarily forgotten. "She's actually helping it get free." Iris moved closer and knelt down beside her daughter. "Maya found the weak spot in the wood," she said. "This branch isn't as solid as it looks." Together, they examined the branch more closely. The outer layer was still strong, but the interior had been hollowed out by insects over the years. Where Maya had been touching it, the wood was soft and crumbly. "If we can break away more of this rotted section," Quinn said, "we might be able to free the little guy without having to lift the whole branch." They worked carefully, pulling away pieces of the deteriorated wood while Maya continued to comfort the cub. The little bear seemed to understand that they were trying to help. It lay still and quiet, occasionally making soft sounds in response to Maya's continued humming. As they worked, Iris couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Several times she looked up and scanned the surrounding trees, but she never saw anything unusual. Still, the sensation persisted. "There," Quinn said finally. "I think that's enough space." The cub seemed to sense that freedom was near. It began to move its pinned leg experimentally, working it back and forth until it could pull free from under the lightened branch. Within moments, it was standing on all four legs, shaky but apparently uninjured. Maya clapped her hands with delight, and the cub actually seemed to wag its tail in response. It took a few tentative steps toward her, sniffing at her outstretched hand. "This is incredible," Quinn said. "I've never seen a wild animal act so tame around humans, especially around a baby." But as he spoke, they heard something that made them all freeze. From somewhere very close by came the sound of slow, deliberate clapping. Someone else was in the clearing with them, and they had been watching the entire rescue. Iris and Quinn spun around, searching for the source of the sound. It was coming from behind a cluster of large pine trees on the far side of the clearing. As they watched, a figure stepped out from behind the trees. It was an elderly man, probably in his 70s, with long gray hair tied back in a ponytail and a weathered face that spoke of decades spent outdoors. He was wearing simple clothes, jeans, a flannel shirt, and worn hiking boots. But what struck Iris most was his eyes. They were the same dark, intelligent eyes as the bear cub. "Well done," the man said, his voice carrying a slight accent that Iris couldn't place. "I was wondering if you would figure it out." Quinn stepped protectively in front of Maya and Iris. "Who are you? How long have you been watching us?" The old man smiled, but it wasn't entirely friendly. "Long enough to see that your daughter has a very special gift. Not many humans can communicate with wild animals the way she just did." Iris felt a chill of fear mixed with something else. Recognition. There was something familiar about this man, though she was certain she had never seen him before. "What do you want?" she asked. The man's smile faded. "I want to know why your daughter was able to free my grandson when I could not." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Iris felt the world tilt slightly around her. "Your grandson," she repeated. The old man nodded toward the bear cub, who had moved to stand beside Maya. The little bear was looking back and forth between the old man and the baby, as if it was trying to decide who to trust. "His name is Koda," the man said, "and he is my grandson, just as much as any human child could be. The question is, How did your daughter know how to help him when his own family could not? Quinn stepped forward, his protective instincts fully engaged. Look, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but that's a bear cub, not your grandson. And we need to get our daughter away from here before its real mother shows up. The old man's expression darkened. His real mother is dead, he said quietly. Killed by poachers 3 weeks ago, along with his sister. I am all the family Coda has left now. The sadness in his voice was unmistakable, and Iris felt her fear beginning to mix with sympathy. But the man's claim that the cub was his grandson still made no sense. I know how this sounds, the old man continued, as if reading her thoughts. But there are things in this world that cannot be explained by the science you know. Things that your ancestors understood, but modern people have forgotten. Maya, who had been quietly listening to the adults talk, suddenly stood up and walked toward the old man. She moved with the same fearless determination she had shown when approaching the trapped cub. "Maya, no!" Iris called, but her daughter paid no attention. Maya walked right up to the old man and looked up at him with her wide, dark eyes. Then she reached up and took his weathered hand in her tiny one. The effect on the old man was immediate and dramatic. His stern expression melted away, replaced by something that looked like awe. He knelt down to Maya's level and studied her face intently. "Remarkable," he whispered. "She has the old sight. I can see it in her eyes." "The old sight?" Quinn asked. "What are you talking about?" But before the old man could answer, Coda the bear cub did something that defied every law of nature Iris thought she knew. The little animal looked directly at the old man and spoke. Not in words, exactly, but in a series of sounds that were clearly meant as communication. Low grunts and soft whines that formed patterns, almost like sentences. And incredibly, impossibly, the old man seemed to understand every sound. "Yes, little one," he said in response to the cub's sounds. "I know she helped you, and I know you trust her." Maya giggled and patted the old man's hand, then turned and patted Coda's head. The three of them, the elderly man, the baby, and the bear cub, formed a circle of understanding that left Iris and Quinn feeling like outsiders. "This is impossible," Quinn said, his voice barely above a whisper. The old man looked up at them. "Nothing is impossible," he said. "Your daughter has a gift that most humans lost generations ago. She can speak the old language, the one that all living things once shared before people forgot how to listen." Iris watched as Maya continued to interact with both the man and the cub, as if they were all old friends. Her 18-month-old daughter was having a conversation, an actual conversation, with a wild animal and a complete stranger, and somehow it felt perfectly natural. "How is this happening?" Iris asked. The old man stood up slowly, his joints creaking with age. "The better question," he said, "is why it's happening now. Maya's gift is extremely rare, and it usually doesn't manifest until much later in life. For her to have this ability so young means something significant is coming." He paused and looked around the clearing, his expression growing serious. "Something that will require the old alliances between humans and animals to be restored." As if summoned by his words, the forest around them began to come alive. Birds started calling from the treetops, squirrels chattered from the branches, and somewhere in the distance a wolf howled. It was as if every animal in the forest was responding to some signal that only they could hear. Maya looked up at the canopy above them and made a series of soft sounds that were remarkably similar to the ones Coda had made. Immediately, several birds flew down and perched on low branches around the clearing, watching the scene with intelligent eyes. "She's calling them," the old man said with wonder in his voice. "Without any training, without even knowing what she's doing, she's using the old language to call the forest creatures to her." Quinn grabbed Iris's arm. "We need to get out of here," he said urgently. "I don't care how amazing this is. Something isn't right. This man appears out of nowhere, claims a bear cub is his grandson, and now our daughter's apparently talking to animals. We need to take Maya and go home." But as he spoke, more animals began to appear at the edges of the clearing. A red fox stepped delicately through the underbrush, followed by a family of raccoons. A deer emerged from behind a fallen log, its large eyes fixed on Maya. Even a couple of wild turkeys came strutting into the open space. All of the animals were focused on Maya, and none of them showed any fear of the humans present. It was as if Maya had sent out some kind of invitation that every creature in the forest had received and accepted. "This is what I was afraid of," the old man said quietly. "Her power is too strong, too uncontrolled. She's calling every animal within miles to this place." "Why is that a problem?" Iris asked, though she was beginning to feel overwhelmed by the sight of so many wild animals gathering around her daughter. The old man's expression grew grave. "Because there are other things in these woods that will hear her call, things that haven't been seen in these parts for decades, things that your ancestors built their homes far from these forests to avoid." As if his words had summoned it, a sound echoed through the trees that was unlike anything Iris had ever heard. It was part roar, part howl, and part something else entirely, something that seemed to come from a throat that was not quite animal and not quite human. Every animal in the clearing immediately went silent and still. Even Maya stopped her soft babbling and looked toward the sound with wide, uncertain eyes. "What was that?" Quinn asked, his voice tight with fear. The old man was already moving, scooping up Coda in his arms and backing toward the trees. "Something that should have stayed sleeping," he said. "Maya's call was too strong. She woke something that has been dormant in the deep forest for a very long time." The sound came again, closer this time, and now they could hear the crash of something very large moving through the forest toward them. The gathered animals began to scatter, fleeing in all directions except toward the approaching sound. Maya started to cry, sensing the fear of the adults around her even if she didn't understand its source. Iris rushed to pick her up, but as she lifted her daughter, Maya reached out toward Coda with desperate hands. "She doesn't want to be separated from him," the old man observed. "The bond they formed is stronger than I thought." "What kind of bond?" Iris asked, holding Maya close as the crashing sounds grew nearer. The old man looked at her with eyes full of ancient knowledge. "The kind that hasn't been seen for generations," he said. "Your daughter and my grandson are connected now in ways that go beyond the physical world. They are spirit-bonded, linked by the old magic that flows through all living things." The crashing stopped suddenly, leaving the forest in an eerie silence. Somewhere out there, whatever had been approaching them was now standing still, listening, evaluating the situation. "We need to leave," the old man said urgently. "All of us together. If we separate now, we'll all be in greater danger." Quinn started to protest, but Maya reached out toward the old man and made a sound that was clearly a plea. She wanted to stay near him and Coda, and her distress at the thought of separation was obvious. "She's right," the old man said. "We're safer together. But we need to move now, before it decides to show itself." "Before what shows itself?" Iris demanded. The old man met her eyes with a look that chilled her to the bone. "The guardian of the deep forest," he said. "The creature that was placed here long ago to keep the old magic from being disturbed. Your daughter's awakening power has drawn its attention, and it will not rest until it determines whether she is a threat or a blessing to the balance of nature." As if in response to his words, a shadow passed overhead, though there were no clouds in the sky. They all looked up to see something impossible flying above the treetops. Something far too large to be any bird that belonged in these forests. Maya stopped crying and pointed upward, making a sound of wonder. Whatever was flying above them, she wasn't afraid of it. She was fascinated. The old man's expression shifted from fear to amazement. "She's not afraid," he said. "The guardian isn't frightening her. That means—" He trailed off, staring at Maya with new understanding dawning in his eyes. "That means what?" Quinn asked. The old man's voice was barely a whisper when he answered. "It means your daughter isn't just gifted with the old sight. She may be the one the prophecies spoke of, the bridge between worlds, the child who would restore the ancient covenant between humans and all other living things." The shadow passed overhead again, and this time they could see more clearly what was casting it. It was enormous, with wings that seemed to shimmer between feathers and something else entirely. As they watched, the creature began to descend toward the clearing, and Maya reached up toward it with joy rather than fear. The old man set Coda down gently and knelt beside Maya. "If I'm right about who she is," he said to Iris and Quinn, "then everything is about to change for all of us." The massive creature descended slowly, its wings creating currents of air that stirred the fallen leaves around them. As it came closer, Iris could see that it wasn't quite like any animal she had ever imagined. Its body seemed to shift and shimmer, sometimes appearing to be a giant eagle, other times looking more like a dragon from ancient legends. Maya laughed with pure delight and clapped her tiny hands as the creature settled on the ground at the far edge of the clearing. It was easily 20 feet from wingtip to wingtip, with eyes that glowed like golden fire. But despite its intimidating size, there was something gentle in the way it looked at Maya. "Arian," the old man whispered, his voice filled with reverence, "I never thought I would see you again in this lifetime." The creature, Arian, tilted its massive head and made a sound that was like wind chimes mixed with distant thunder. Maya immediately responded with her own soft sounds, and incredibly, the two seemed to be having a conversation. Quinn grabbed Iris's arm. "This is insane," he said. "Our daughter is talking to some kind of monster, and you're just standing there watching." But Iris found herself transfixed by what she was seeing. There was nothing monstrous about the way Arian was interacting with Maya. The creature was being incredibly gentle, lowering its great head so that Maya could reach up and touch its feathers with her small hands. "He's not a monster," the old man said softly. "Arian is one of the ancient guardians, placed here long ago to protect the balance between the human world and the wild. He hasn't shown himself to anyone for over 50 years. Coda tottered over to Maya on his small bare legs and made a series of grunting sounds. Maya looked down at him and made similar sounds back, then looked up at Arian and repeated the same pattern. "She's translating," the old man said with amazement. Coda told her something, and she passed the message to Arian. Arian's golden eyes fixed on the old man, and the creature made a long, complex series of sounds. The old man's face went pale as he listened. "What did he say?" Iris asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. The old man was quiet for a long moment, processing what he had heard. "He says that Maya's awakening has created ripples that extend far beyond this forest. Other guardians in distant places have felt the disturbance. Some are pleased by what they sense, but others are concerned." "Concerned about what?" Quinn asked. "About whether humanity is ready for the return of the old magic." The last time humans had this kind of connection with the natural world, it ended badly. Wars were fought, forests were burned, and the Guardians retreated from the world to prevent further damage. Arion made another sound, shorter, but somehow more urgent. The old man nodded gravely. He says we need to move away from this place immediately. Maya's demonstration of power here has attracted attention from things that should remain undisturbed. We have perhaps 10 minutes before they arrive. What kind of things? Iris asked, though she was beginning to think she didn't want any more answers to her questions. Before the old man could respond, the temperature in the clearing dropped noticeably. Their breath began to mist in the suddenly frigid air, and frost started to form on the fallen leaves around their feet. Maya shivered and reached for her mother, but she didn't seem frightened. Instead, she looked around the clearing with curiosity, as if she was trying to locate the source of the cold. "Shadow spirits," the old man said grimly. "They feed on magical energy, and Maya's display has drawn them like moths to a flame. If they reach her while her power is still uncontrolled, they could drain her life force completely." Arion spread his massive wings and made a sound that was clearly a warning. Through the trees around the clearing, Iris could see movement in the shadows, dark shapes that seemed to flow like liquid smoke between the trunks. "How do we get away from them?" Quinn asked, picking up Maya and holding her close to his chest. "We don't run from them," the old man said. "They're faster than any human, and they can track magical energy across vast distances. We have to find a way to shield Maya's power until she learns to control it herself." Kota whimpered and pressed himself against Maya's legs. The little bear could obviously sense the approaching danger, and his fear was infectious. Even Arion seemed tense, his great head turning back and forth as he watched the moving shadows. "There is one way," the old man said slowly, as if the idea was forming in his mind as he spoke. "But it would require trust. Complete trust from all of you." "What kind of trust?" Iris asked. The old man looked at each of them in turn. "Arion can carry us away from here, but not in the way you might think. He can take us to the hidden realm, the place between the human world and the wild where the ancient laws still hold sway. There, Maya would be safe while she learns to master her abilities." Quinn shook his head immediately. "Absolutely not. We're not going anywhere with a giant flying creature to some mystical realm. We're taking our daughter and going home." But as he spoke, the shadow spirits drew closer. They were easier to see now, dark forms that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Where they passed, plants withered and died, leaving trails of blackened earth behind them. Maya made a sound of distress and reached toward Arion. The great creature lowered his head again, and Maya placed both of her small hands on his feathers. Immediately, a soft golden light began to emanate from the point of contact. "Look," Iris breathed. Where Maya touched Arion, the golden light spread outward, creating a protective barrier around them. The approaching shadow spirits slowed their advance, apparently unable or unwilling to enter the lighted area. "She's instinctively creating a ward," the old man said with wonder. "Without any training, she's using Arion's power to protect us all." But the effort was clearly taking a toll on Maya. She began to droop against Arion's feathers, and the golden light started to flicker. "She can't maintain this for long," the old man warned. "She's too young, too untrained. The energy drain will exhaust her quickly." Quinn looked around desperately. "There has to be another way. Some other solution that doesn't involve trusting our daughter to a creature from a fairy tale." The old man's expression was sympathetic but firm. "I understand your fear, but sometimes the only way forward is through the door you never wanted to open. The shadow spirits won't give up. They'll follow Maya wherever she goes in the human world, growing stronger and more numerous until they overwhelm any protection we can provide. Iris watched her daughter struggling to maintain the protective light and felt her heart breaking. Maya was just a baby, barely able to walk steadily, and yet she was somehow holding back creatures of darkness to protect her family. "How do we know you're telling the truth?" she asked the old man. "How do we know you're not leading us into more danger?" The old man met her eyes steadily. "You don't," he said simply. "You have to choose between the danger you can see and the unknown that might offer safety. But I will tell you this. I have spent my entire life protecting this forest and the creatures in it. I would not risk Koda's safety on a lie." As if understanding that he was being discussed, Koda made a series of sounds that were clearly directed at Maya. She looked down at him and responded in the same sound language they had been using earlier. "What did he tell her?" Iris asked. The old man listened carefully to the exchange between the two young creatures. He told her that he trusts Arian completely, and that where they're going is beautiful and safe. He said that all the animals there are friends, and that no shadow spirits can reach that place. Maya looked up at her parents with her wide, trusting eyes, and made a sound that was unmistakably a request. She wanted to go with Arian and Koda to the hidden realm. "She's asking for permission," the old man translated. "She understands that this is a big decision, and she wants her parents to agree." The golden light flickered again, and Maya swayed with exhaustion. The shadow spirits had formed a complete circle around their protective barrier now, testing its edges and looking for weaknesses. Quinn closed his eyes tightly, struggling with the impossible choice. When he opened them again, his face was set with determination. "If we do this," he said to the old man, "how do we get back? How do we know this isn't permanent?" "The hidden realm exists alongside our world," the old man explained. "Time moves differently there, but travel between the realms is possible for those who know the way. I give you my word that I will bring your family back to your cabin safely once Maya has learned to control her abilities." Iris looked at her exhausted daughter, then at the circle of shadow spirits closing in around them. She thought about the peaceful life they had been living in their cabin, and how it would never be the same now that Maya's powers had awakened. "How long would we be gone?" she asked. "In our time? Perhaps a few days. In the hidden realm, it could be weeks or months, depending on how quickly Maya learns to master her gifts." Arian made another urgent sound, and the old man's expression grew tense. "We need to decide now," he said. "The shadow spirits are calling others to join them. Soon there will be too many for even Arian to fight." Maya made one more soft sound, this one clearly directed at her parents. Though she couldn't speak in words they understood, her meaning was clear. She was asking them to trust her, to trust the connection she felt with Koda and Arian and the old man. Iris looked at Quinn and saw her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. They were parents, and their job was to protect their daughter, but sometimes protection meant accepting help from unexpected sources. "Okay," Iris said quietly. "We'll go." Quinn nodded his agreement, though his face was tight with worry. "But we stay together, all of us. No separating, no matter what happens." The old man smiled for the first time since they had met him. "Agreed. Arian will carry us all." The great creature lowered himself to the ground, folding his wings to create a space where they could climb onto his back. The old man helped them settle into position, with Maya sitting in front of Iris and Quinn behind them, while he and Koda took their places at the front. "Hold tight," the old man warned. "Travel between realms can be disorienting the first time." Arion rose slowly into the air, his powerful wings creating gusts that scattered the shadow spirits like smoke. As they climbed higher, Iris could see more of the creatures emerging from the forest below, converging on the clearing they had just left. But as they rose above the treetops, something strange began to happen. The air around them started to shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. The familiar landscape of Pine Ridge Forest began to fade and blur, replaced by something that looked like the same forest, but somehow more vivid, more alive. Maya laughed with delight as the transformation continued. Colors became richer, sounds became clearer, and the very air seemed to sparkle with energy. They were entering the hidden realm, the place between worlds where magic still flowed freely. As they flew over this new landscape, Iris could see creatures moving below that belonged to no natural world she knew. Deer with silver antlers that glowed like moonlight, trees that moved and swayed without any wind, and streams that flowed uphill toward mountains that seemed to touch the sky. "Welcome to the Everwood," the old man called back to them over the sound of Arion's wing beats. "The last sanctuary of the old magic, where your daughter will learn to master abilities that most humans have forgotten ever existed." But even as he spoke, Iris noticed something troubling. Far below them, at the very edge of her vision, she could see dark spots moving across the magical landscape. The shadow spirits had found a way to follow them into the hidden realm. "Look down there," she called to the old man, pointing toward the dark movements below. The old man followed her gaze, and his face went grim. "That shouldn't be possible," he said. "The shadow spirits have never been able to cross into the Everwood before." Arion made a sound that was clearly one of concern, and he began to fly faster, his powerful wings carrying them deeper into the magical realm. But the dark spots below were keeping pace, and Iris could see that there were more of them now than there had been in the human world. "What does this mean?" Quinn asked, his voice tight with fear. The old man was quiet for a long moment, studying the pursuing shadow spirits with obvious worry. "It means that Maya's power is even stronger than I thought," he finally said. "Strong enough to tear holes between the worlds, allowing creatures to pass through barriers that have held for centuries." Coda whimpered and pressed closer to the old man, who stroked the little bear's fur reassuringly. But Iris could see the concern in his eyes. "Are we safe in this hidden realm?" she asked. "We were," the old man said. "But if the shadow spirits can follow us here, then nowhere is truly safe until Maya learns to control her abilities. And if she can't learn quickly enough—" He trailed off, but the implication was clear. Maya's uncontrolled power wasn't just attracting dangerous creatures. It was breaking down the ancient barriers that kept the human world and the magical world separate. Maya, oblivious to the adults' concerns, continued to laugh with joy as they soared over the impossible landscape below. She reached out toward passing clouds that sparkled with their own inner light, and every time she moved, ripples of golden energy spread out from her small form. Each ripple seemed to tear tiny holes in the fabric of reality itself, and through those holes, more shadow spirits poured into the Everwood like water through a cracked dam. Iris realized with growing horror that her daughter wasn't just in danger from the creatures pursuing them. Maya herself was the danger. An untrained magical force powerful enough to destroy the boundaries between worlds. And they were flying deeper into a realm full of magical creatures and ancient powers, with no idea how to stop the destruction her daughter was unwittingly causing with every breath she took. Arion suddenly changed direction, diving toward a massive tree that seemed to stretch impossibly high into the sky. As they approached, Iris could see that the tree wasn't just large, it was alive in a way that no normal tree could be, with a face visible in the bark and branches that moved to welcome them. "The heart tree," the old man called back to them. "If there's anyone who can help Maya control her power, it will be the Ancient One who dwells within." But as they landed on a broad platform nestled among the tree's lower branches, Iris noticed that even here, in this place of supposed safety, dark shadows were beginning to gather at the edges of their vision. The shadow spirits had followed them even to the heart of the magical realm, and they were getting stronger with every moment that passed. Time was running out, and Iris was beginning to fear that bringing Maya here had only made things worse. The Ancient One's voice spoke from within the tree, a sound like wind through leaves mixed with the creaking of old wood. "Welcome, child of two worlds," the voice said, clearly addressing Maya. "I have been waiting for you for longer than your people have walked the earth." Maya looked around with wonder, then made a soft sound in response. To everyone's amazement, the Ancient One laughed, a sound like gentle rain on summer leaves. "Yes, little one," the tree being said, "I can understand you perfectly. But first, we must deal with the darkness you have inadvertently invited into our realm. Your power is like a beacon, calling to every shadow spirit across all the worlds." The old man stepped forward. "Ancient One, we seek sanctuary and training for the child. Her abilities have awakened too early and too strong." "I can see that," the Ancient One replied, and there was a note of concern in the tree voice. "But this child is more than just gifted. She is the confluence, the one prophesied to either heal the rift between worlds or tear them apart completely." Iris felt her blood turn cold. "What does that mean?" The Ancient One's attention turned to her. "It means, human mother, that your daughter holds the fate of all realms in her tiny hands, and we have very little time to teach her how to wield that power responsibly before the shadow spirits grow strong enough to consume everything we have worked to protect." As if summoned by those words, a wave of darkness began to rise from the forest floor below, climbing toward their sanctuary in the heart tree like a living tide of shadow and despair. The Ancient One's branches swayed with sudden urgency. "Quickly, bring the child inside the Heartwood chamber. The outer defenses will not hold against this many shadow spirits." A section of the massive trunk opened like a doorway, revealing a glowing interior that pulsed with warm, golden light. The old man ushered them through the opening, with Coda scampering close behind Maya's feet. Inside the heart tree, the walls were lined with what looked like living crystal that gave off a soft, comforting radiance. The space was larger than should have been possible, stretching up into darkness above them and extending into chambers that branched off like the rooms of a vast palace. Maya immediately ran to one of the crystal walls and placed her hands against it. The moment she made contact, the entire chamber erupted in brilliant light, and patterns began to race across the crystal surfaces like veins of liquid starlight. "Extraordinary," the Ancient One's voice echoed from all around them. "She's activating systems that have been dormant for millennia. The child is interfacing directly with the tree's consciousness." Quinn moved to pull Maya away from the wall, but the old man stopped him. "Let her explore. She's not in danger here. The tree is teaching her, showing her things about her own nature that we could never explain in words." Through the crystal walls, they could see the shadow spirits flowing up the trunk of the tree like black water. But as they reached the level of the Heartwood chamber, something stopped them. They pressed against an invisible barrier, their dark forms writhing with frustration. "The tree's natural defenses are holding them back," the old man explained. "But it won't last forever. They're feeding on Maya's leaked energy, growing stronger by the moment." Iris watched her daughter with growing amazement. Maya was moving from crystal to crystal, touching each one and causing it to flare with light. With each contact, the patterns racing through the walls grew more complex, more beautiful. "What is she doing?" Iris asked. "She's reading the tree's memories," the Ancient One replied. "Every crystal contains thousands of years of stored knowledge about the connection between all living things. She's learning the history of magic itself, absorbing centuries of wisdom and moments." But as Maya continued her exploration, something troubling began to happen. Dark veins started to appear in some of the crystals, spreading outward from where she touched them like cracks in glass. "That's not supposed to happen," the old man said with alarm. "The crystals are being corrupted by something." Kota whimpered and ran to Maya's side. When the little bear touched one of the darkened crystals, he immediately jerked his paw back with a cry of pain. "The shadow spirits," the Ancient One said grimly. "They're not just surrounding us. Some of them have found a way inside the tree itself, following the pathways that Maya's power has opened." Maya seemed to sense the change in the crystals. She pulled her hands back and looked around the chamber with confusion. For the first time since they had arrived in the Everwood, she looked scared. "We need to get her away from the corrupted crystals," Quinn said, moving toward his daughter. But before he could reach her, Maya did something unexpected. She began to sing, not the wordless humming she had done before, but an actual melody with notes that seemed to come from somewhere deep within the tree itself. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The dark veins in the crystals began to retreat, pushed back by waves of pure, golden light that flowed in rhythm with Maya's song. The shadow spirits pressing against the chamber's defenses suddenly recoiled as if burned. "She's singing the song of cleansing," the Ancient One said with wonder. "How can she know that melody?" "It was lost to the world centuries ago." "What's the song of cleansing?" Iris asked, watching in amazement as her daughter's voice seemed to heal the damage to the crystals. "A melody that existed before words, before language as you know it," the old man explained. "It was the first song, the one that separated light from darkness when the worlds were young. Only a few beings in all of history have ever been able to sing it." Maya's song grew stronger, and the golden light began to spread beyond the chamber. Through the crystal walls they could see it flowing down the trunk of the tree, driving the shadow spirits back toward the forest floor. But the effort was taking a tremendous toll on the child. She began to sway on her feet, and her voice started to waver. "She's pouring too much of herself into the song," the Ancient One warned. "If she doesn't stop soon, the energy drain could be fatal." Quinn started toward Maya again, but this time it was Kota who stopped him. The little bear cub stood up on his hind legs and began to make sounds that harmonized with Maya's melody. Other voices joined in. Arian's wind chime calls from outside the tree, and even the Ancient One's deep wooden tones. "They're supporting her," the old man realized, "sharing the burden of the song so she doesn't have to carry it alone." Maya's voice strengthened again, and the combined harmony of all the magical creatures created something more powerful than any of them could have achieved individually. The golden light intensified, and the shadow spirits outside began to flee back into the depths of the forest. But just as it seemed they had won, something new appeared in the chamber with them. A figure materialized from the shadows between the crystals. Not a shadow spirit, but something far more dangerous. It looked like a woman, tall and elegant, with skin that seemed to be made of starlight and eyes like deep space. She wore robes that shifted between black and silver, and when she moved, reality seemed to bend around her. "Enough," she said, and her voice carried the authority of eternity itself. "The child's song ends now." Maya's melody faltered and died as the mysterious woman's presence filled the chamber. All the magical creatures, Coda, Arian, even the Ancient One, fell silent in what was clearly fear. "Who are you?" the old man demanded, though his voice shook as he spoke. The woman turned her ageless gaze on him. "I am Nyx, keeper of the void between worlds, and this child's untrained power is tearing holes in the fabric of existence itself." She gestured toward Maya, who had collapsed to her knees, exhausted from singing the song of cleansing. Every time she uses her abilities, she creates fractures that allow beings like the shadow spirits to travel between realms. She is unmaking the careful balance that has kept the world separate and safe. Iris moved protectively in front of her daughter. "Then teach her to control it. Help her learn to use her power safely." Nyx's expression was both sad and implacable. There is no safe way to use power of this magnitude. The child is what we call a world breaker, one whose very existence threatens the stability of all realities. Throughout history there have been perhaps a dozen such beings, and every one of them ultimately had to choose between giving up their power completely or being contained. "Contained?" Quinn asked, though he clearly didn't want to hear the answer. "Placed in eternal sleep, their consciousness bound within a prison of crystal and starlight where they can dream harmlessly for all eternity." The chamber fell into stunned silence. Maya, unaware of the conversation happening around her, was playing with one of the smaller crystals, making it pulse with gentle light. "There has to be another way," Iris said desperately. "She's just a baby. She doesn't understand what she's doing." Nyx studied Maya with those infinite eyes. "Her age is irrelevant. Power of this scale cannot be left unchecked, regardless of the wielder's intentions." But then something unexpected happened. Coda tottered over to Nyx and looked up at her with his small, dark eyes. The ancient being and the bear cub stared at each other for a long moment, and something passed between them. Some form of communication that none of the others could understand. "Interesting," Nyx said finally. "The guardian-bonded creature pleads for mercy on the child's behalf. He offers his own life force as a stabilizing anchor for her power." The old man gasped. "Coda, no! You don't understand what you're proposing." But Coda made a series of determined sounds, looking back and forth between Nyx and Maya with clear intent. "He understands perfectly," Nyx said. "He offers to bind his spirit to hers permanently, creating a living anchor that could theoretically contain her power without destroying her consciousness. But the cost would be enormous. They would never be able to be separated, and when one dies, both would perish." Maya seemed to sense that something important was being discussed. She crawled over to Coda and wrapped her arms around the little bear in a fierce hug. They looked at each other with perfect understanding, and Maya made soft sounds that were clearly agreement with whatever Coda had proposed. "They're both too young to make such a decision," Quinn protested. Nyx tilted her head, considering. Age is a concept that applies differently to beings of power. The child and the guardian creature understand the stakes in ways that transcend normal childhood comprehension. She raised one hand, and suddenly the chamber was filled with swirling images, scenes from possible futures that played out in the air around them like living paintings. In one vision they saw Maya as a teenager, her uncontrolled power accidentally destroying entire cities. In another, they saw her as an adult, consumed by madness as the weight of her abilities drove her insane. A third showed the shadow spirits growing in number until they devoured both the human world and the Everwood. But then the visions changed. They saw Maya and Coda as they grew older, always together, their bond allowing her to channel her power safely. They saw her healing wounded forests, communicating with creatures across all realms, building bridges between worlds that had been separated for centuries. The bonding ritual would give the child a chance, Nix said as the visions faded, but it is not a guarantee. The power within her is so vast that even with an anchor, she might still prove too dangerous to exist. The Ancient One's voice rustled through the chamber. What would the ritual involve? A permanent fusion of their life forces, Nix explained. They would share a single destiny, their souls intertwined so completely that her power would flow through both of them, instead of building up dangerously within her alone. Maya looked up at her parents with those wide, trusting eyes, and made a sound that was clearly a question. She wanted to know what they thought she should do. Iris felt tears running down her face. How could she make such an impossible choice? Allow her daughter to be bound forever to a bear cub in a ritual that might not even work, or watch as Nix took Maya away to an eternal crystal prison. If we agree to this bonding, she said finally, what happens afterward? Where would Maya live? How would she grow up? The child could remain with you, Nix said. The bonded pair would need to return to the Everwood periodically for training and guidance, but they could live primarily in the human world. The guardian creature would provide natural camouflage for her abilities. Quinn looked at the old man. What do you think? Is this really the best option? The old man was quiet for a long moment, watching Maya and Coda together. I've lived in these woods for 70 years, he said finally. I've seen the damage that uncontrolled magic can do, and I've also seen the miracles it can create when properly guided. These two young ones have already formed a bond that transcends anything I've witnessed. If anyone can make such a ritual work, it would be them. Arion, still perched outside the tree, made a series of calls that the old man translated. He says that the guardian spirits of the forest will support the bonding ritual. They believe Maya and Coda together could herald a new age of cooperation between the human and natural worlds. Maya crawled over to her parents and tugged on their clothing, looking up at them with determination. She pointed to herself, then to Coda, then made a gesture that encompassed the entire chamber around them. Her message was clear. She wanted to try the bonding, she wanted to stay with her new friend, and she wanted to protect this magical place that had welcomed them. The choice must be unanimous, Nix said. All parties, the child, the guardian creature, and the parents, must agree freely to the ritual. Iris looked at Quinn and saw her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. They were being asked to make a decision that would change their daughter's life forever, in ways they couldn't fully understand. But the alternative was losing her entirely. What exactly would happen during the ritual? Quinn asked. Nix gestured, and the air in the chamber shimmered with new images. They saw a ceremony taking place in a grove deep within the Everwood, with creatures from across the magical realm gathered in witness. Maya and Coda stood together in the center of a circle of ancient stones, their hands and paws glowing with shared light. The ritual takes place at the Heart Grove, where the first bonds between humans and nature were forged. The process itself is painless, but permanent. Once completed, Maya and Coda would share not just their life forces, but their thoughts, emotions, and dreams. They would become two parts of a single being. Maya made another soft sound and pointed to the images floating in the air. She was asking if that was really what would happen to her and Coda. Yes, little one, Nix said gently. You would never be alone again, but you would also never be apart. Is that truly what you want? Maya looked at Coda, and the little bear looked back at her. They seemed to have an entire conversation in that glance, using the wordless communication they had developed since first meeting. Finally, Maya nodded decisively and hugged Coda close to her chest. Coda made a sound that was clearly agreement. They've made their choice. the old man said softly. But the decision ultimately rests with you, as her parents. Iris wiped her eyes and looked at her daughter. Really looked at her. Even now, exhausted from singing the song of cleansing, Maya's eyes held a wisdom and purpose that seemed far beyond her 18 months of life. This wasn't just their baby anymore. She was something new, something unprecedented. If we say yes, Iris said, will we still be her parents? Will she still be our daughter? In every way that matters, Nyx assured her. The bonding will enhance her abilities and provide stability, but it won't change who she is at her core. She will still love you, still need you, still be the child you've raised. Quinn knelt down next to Maya and gently touched her face. Are you sure this is what you want, sweetheart? Really sure? Maya looked at him with those impossibly mature eyes and nodded. Then she made a sound that, while wordless, was unmistakably, I love you, Daddy. Then we agree, Quinn said, his voice thick with emotion. We agree to the bonding ritual. Nyx nodded solemnly. Then we will proceed to the Heart Grove. But first, you should know that once the ritual begins, there is no turning back. The choice you make now will echo through all the realms for generations to come. As they prepared to leave the Heart Tree, Maya took one last look at the crystal walls that had taught her so much. She placed her hand against one of the largest crystals, and it flared with brilliant light that seemed to contain all the colors of sunrise. The crystal's message was clear to everyone in the chamber. Welcome home, little daughter of two worlds. Your real journey is just beginning. But even as they made ready to depart for the Heart Grove, none of them noticed the small crack that had appeared in one of the darker crystals near the back of the chamber. Through that tiny fissure, something ancient and patient began to seep in. Something that had been waiting for exactly this moment, when the most powerful magical being in generations would be at her most vulnerable. The shadow spirits had been just the beginning. Something far more dangerous had been awakened by Maya's presence in the Everwood, and it was following them toward the Heart Grove where the bonding ritual would take place. As they emerged from the Heart Tree and climbed back onto Arian's broad back, Maya looked around the magical landscape with new understanding. She could see the connections now, the threads of energy that linked every living thing, the patterns that held the worlds together, and the dark places where those patterns were beginning to fray. She pointed toward one of those dark places and made an urgent sound. Something was wrong there, something that posed a threat to everything they were trying to protect. But Nyx either didn't see what Maya was pointing at or chose to ignore it. The Heart Grove awaits, she said simply, and Arian launched them into the sky toward their destination. Below them, in the dark place Maya had indicated, something stirred. Something that had been sleeping for millennia was finally awakening, drawn by the promise of power that would soon be concentrated in one small, vulnerable child during the most important magical ritual in 1,000 years. The race to save Maya's future had become a race against something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined, and they didn't even know they were running. The Heart Grove appeared below them like a dream made manifest. Ancient stones older than civilization formed a perfect circle in a clearing, where flowers bloomed in impossible colors and trees bore fruit that glowed with inner light. The very air shimmered with concentrated magic, and every blade of grass seemed to pulse with its own gentle rhythm. As Arian descended toward the sacred space, creatures from across the Everwood emerged to witness the ceremony. Deer with antlers like crystal, wolves whose fur sparkled with starlight, and birds whose songs could heal wounded hearts. Even the trees themselves leaned inward, their branches forming a natural cathedral overhead. But Maya was still pointing toward the dark disturbance she had spotted from the heart tree. Her agitation was growing stronger, and Coda was picking up on her distress, whimpering and pressing close to her side. "Something comes," the old man said suddenly, his weathered face pale with concern. "I can feel it too now, an ancient malevolence that should have remained buried." Nyx's expression hardened. Impossible. Nothing could approach the Heart Grove during a bonding ceremony. The protective wards are absolute. But even as she spoke, the flowers around the grove began to wither. The magical light dimmed, and several of the gathered creatures fled back into the forest with cries of terror. From the darkness between the trees stepped something that had no name in any living language. It was tall as a mountain and dark as the space between stars, with eyes like dying suns and a presence that made reality itself recoil. Where it walked, the very ground cracked and bled shadows. "The Unmaker," Nyx whispered, her voice filled with a fear that Iris had never imagined possible from such a powerful being. "The first darkness, the void that existed before creation. How can it be here?" The ancient horror turned its terrible gaze on Maya, and when it spoke, its voice was the sound of worlds ending. "The child's power has torn the final veil. The barriers that held me in the deep dark are broken. I have come to reclaim what was always mine." Maya made a sound of pure terror and buried her face against her mother's chest. For the first time since her powers had awakened, she seemed like nothing more than a frightened baby. But Coda did something extraordinary. The little bear cub stepped forward, placing himself between Maya and the Unmaker. His small body was trembling with fear, but his determination was absolute. He made a series of sounds that rang with surprising authority across the grove. The Unmaker paused, tilting its massive head to study the tiny creature that dared to challenge it. A guardian, bonded, makes demands? How amusing. "He's not making demands," the old man translated, his voice filled with wonder. "He's making an offer. He's offering himself in Maya's place." "Coda, no!" Iris cried, but the little bear didn't waver. The Unmaker laughed, and the sound shattered several of the ancient stones around the grove. "What could one small creature possibly offer that would interest me?" Coda made another series of sounds, more complex this time. As he spoke, something amazing began to happen. His fur started to glow with the same golden light that had emanated from Maya during her singing. But this wasn't Maya's power reflecting through him. This was something entirely his own. "He's revealing his true nature," Nyx said with shock. "He's not just a guardian-bonded creature. He's a guardian prime, one of the original spirits given form to protect the balance of all worlds." The assembled creatures of the grove gasped and bowed their heads. Even Arian tucked his great wings in a gesture of respect. Guardian primes were legendary beings, so rare that most considered them myths. A guardian prime, the Unmaker mused, its attention now fully focused on Coda. "I have not encountered one of your kind for millennia. What do you offer, little guardian?" Coda's response was immediate and clear, though only those with magical sight could understand his true meaning. The old man's eyes filled with tears as he translated. He offers a new compact. Instead of the old cycle of conflict between creation and void, he proposes balance. Maya's power channeled through him could heal the wounds between worlds instead of destroying them. Creation and uncreation working together instead of in opposition.